table describes a bit the landscape of the whole invoice automation processes. There are basically three main approaches how to handle invoice processing. On the left column, you can see the fully manual process. That's the most usual one. You know, nothing is automated; all is handled by data entry clerks. And due to our research, we know that an average data entry clerk needs to do more than 150,000 keystrokes a month, which is a huge number and very difficult and tedious kind of job. So obviously, people try to automate this process. The most common way how to automate this process is traditional data capture systems. Those you probably know very well. Those systems are based on templates, and those of you who have tried to do invoice automation through those kind of systems, you realize that, okay, I have a template-based system, but I need to set up those templates, which takes a long time, and I need to maintain them. This usually needs to be done by some experts, which are usually very expensive and simply do not scale. So with this approach, we usually achieve between 30 to 50% of automation. So you still need to keep quite a lot of FTEs, quite a lot of people doing this job, and the results are still difficult to achieve with this approach. The new wave of data capture systems is depicted on the right, in the right column. And the biggest difference in this approach is it's not using any template. So you don't need to have any in-house or third-party experts that handle all those settings, because this is all handled by artificial intelligence. So what it does, the AI tries to get the feedback from humans and automatically update itself. And this results in much higher levels of automation, up to 95%. And that's why it can change so much money and so much time. So this is the typical landscape of data capture systems. And today we will quickly describe the right column, the cognitive data capture, and then we will dive into more details about Elis. So what are the typical properties of data capture systems? Those systems need to come pre-trained. It means you can use this system without any additional setup. You just start using it, and it should give you some reasonable data without a long phase of setting it up. But as you use it, it should be self-improving. So based on the feedback from your users, it should automatically improve itself. No experts needed. And because it has this feature, it is actually super easy to use for the end users, because you don't need, hundreds of buttons to set it up. You just do your job of data extraction, and it all works. So it's easy to use. It should be also easy to deploy, which is especially important for large organizations that have large processes and a lot of people doing that. And what is also very important for the big clients is that it should be easy to customize, because you probably know that all of you are just saying, but my problem is specific. So the data capture platform should address this problem as well. We will just quickly walk you through how Elis works now to show you where are those properties hidden in Elis. So this is a simple diagram that shows how Elis works. There are 4 simple steps. Of course, it needs to receive the documents. Then in the second step, AI processes those documents. And if it is required, humans can review the data extracted in the user interface, and then data can be exported to the target system. The important step here is this dashed arrow that shows the self-improving feedback loop, because what Elis automatically does, it takes the feedback and corrections done by humans and automatically update the AI engine. So you as the experts, you don't need to take care of that. You just simply you just simply let your users to use Elis, and Elis will take care of all the updates itself. Uh, this is just a quick overview of the validation interface. You can see there are just a handful of buttons here, down here, and this is important because the users that are using Elis, that we are augmenting, basically they need to have like ergonomic user interface and not tons of buttons that they don't know how to use. So in this left panel, you can see the data that can be extracted. What is important and what we will talk about in this webinar is how to customize this left panel so that it fits to your needs. On the right side, you see the document that has been extracted, and you can see that the interface is super lightweight and super easy to use. Talking about deployment, we believe that deployment should be super easy in the 21st century, and obviously everyone has web browser on his computer, so that's why we give access to Elis through web browser, because we believe that this is the easiest way for you as a technical persons to deploy it within your organization. Okay, so this was just a very lightweight introduction. Now we would like to deep dive more into more details about how Elis is designed, how it can be customized, and so on. So this picture shows the four main part of the core system of Elis. So Elis consists of four main features. Of course, it's the artificial intelligence engine that does the automated extractions. There is that validation user interface that I've just shown to you. There is also a reporting engine, because as we are augmenting your employees, we can give you a lot of reports about how your process is working. And very important part is the extension environment. Why there is an extension environment? A lot of customers need some customization of the process. So we built a customization environment that allows us or our partners or even yourself to build custom extensions that can completely change the way how Elis is working. You can actually customize a lot of things, and Peter will talk about that later. So this is how the platform is designed. It's extensible, and the goal of today's webinar is to show you how you can achieve that. Before we start, it's pretty important that you understand the main concepts behind Elis. All the customers are partitioned into isolated organizations, and each organization can consist of those main concepts. The most important concept is a queue, because the queue defines what you want to extract from those documents. So you can create a schema that defines, okay, I want to extract those fields, and it should be this queue. And you then send the documents into particular queues, and documents are flowing and transitioning through a variety of states until they are finally processed. So this is the main concept, and queues actually can be grouped into something that we call workspaces. It gives you, more control and more structure of your process. So if you are processing different types of documents, you can group them in different workspaces. And actually, very important aspect are the users. And you can assign different roles, you can assign different workspaces, different queues, different permissions, and we will talk about that as well. So those are the three main concepts. Maybe to explain it better, let's have a look at the user interface of Elis. This is what you see after you log in. In this left panel, what you see are workspaces. We see invoices and orders in this example. And for invoices workspace, we see two queues, EU invoices and US invoices. This is just an example. You can actually, there is a lot of flexibility in how you define your structure. This is just to show you how it can be done. However, it's totally up to you, and we will talk about it later. So here you can see there is a selected queue EU invoices, and you see three documents in that queue. One of those documents is just being processed by our AI engine. That's the first one, and you can see the other two documents that are waiting for human validation. So this is how it looks like in Elis, and you can see this is what the user sees once he logs in and he is assigned those two workspaces. So we've just described how queues, workspaces, and users basically look like in the Elis user interface. Uh, when you send a document to a queue, it needs to go through four different states. There are actually multiple states, but those are the most important. Uh, Obviously, if you send a document to Elis, and you have multiple ways how to send documents to Elis, Peter will talk about it later as well. The first state that it is in is importing state. It means in this state, Elis AI engine just needs some time to extract the data based on the defined scheme of the queue. Uh, when it is ready, it goes to the second state, which is to review, and in that state, the annotation, which how this is how we call the extracted data itself, is waiting for a review. This review can be done, either by a human data capture clerk, or it can be even automated by different extensions or by different means. If someone is reviewing the document, it's in the state reviewing, and and um, and this is the state where the annotation is blocked by the user, so no other users can access that document at that time because the user has taken it and is reviewing that. So it's assigned to particular user and no one else has access to that. Once the review is ready, the document goes to the exported state that allows you to access the data and integrate it further. So this is the typical life cycle of a document in a queue, and it's pretty easy to understand, I believe. And we will dive into more details how to integrate the first and the last part of this life cycle, and also we will dive into more details how to customize the steps in between. So now I will hand over to Peter, who will tell you more details about the integration and customization.
Thank you, Tomas. Let's talk about how to do this in practice. How to set up Elis for your needs, how to set up Elis for your workflow and for the systems you are integrating into. And yeah, let's start with the integration interfaces that Elis offers, because we at Rossum we really believe in open platforms and in empowering our users to have maximal flexibility and have a real ownership of the technical process so that they can on their own customize everything and set up everything based to their needs. So we built Elis as an open platform that has multiple ways to get data, get documents into Elis, how to get data and documents out of Elis, and that has many interfaces that can let you hook into the workflow essentially and modify the workflow to your needs. For example, to automate processing of some documents, to add some interactivity to the validation process, and so on. We'll cover all this very soon. From a high-level point of view, it's useful to think about how you would build an integration around Elis. when you want to integrate Elis in some workflow. And you have a couple of options. The most basic option we call manual integration, and that's very useful if you are just getting started with Elis, prototyping with Elis, or if you are building a very simple process and you actually do not need to program any software in the simplest case. To integrate with Elis, you can just input all the emails through an email inbox gateway, basically just forward all documents to a special email address and they will appear in Elis. You can manual the documents manually through the web interface as well, even though that's something that we do not recommend for production workloads. You can just download all the captured data for all the exported documents, for example, in some given time range, in either an XML format or a CSV format that you can then open in Excel or very easily parse for importing to other systems. So this is the sort of baseline method if you do not want to do any kind of programming and just want to use the Elis tool, and maybe it's all right that some of the steps are manual or semi-manual. On the other side of the spectrum is the programmatic integration using APIs. That means you can write custom software, custom programs in a programming language of your choice. It can be Python, it can be JavaScript, it can be .NET. There is many possibilities there, and you can use the web-based API, HTTP REST API that Elis offers to import documents, upload documents into Elis, to download either all the exported documents, again in the standard formats, but if you are building software, it's also often most practical to just download it in JSON, which is our sort of default export format, or you can even download more detailed specific information about for a particular document. For example, if you are interested in details like the precise positions of captured data on a page and so on, this is all enabled through the API. So if you are just writing entirely custom software, this is the best option for you, and you can fully wrap Elis in this way. The one thing that's actually also worth mentioning is that by default you would use Elis so that you import documents into Elis. Then the human operators, the data capture clerks, log into Elis, into the Elis dashboards, and they process the documents. Then they log out, and either right away or sometime later you export all the captured data. So this is the most basic integration, which is common, especially in enterprise environments, in those standardized enterprise data capture processes. But you also have another option, which we call embedded Elis, and in this case you can integrate Elis tighter within your software. For example, if you are a document management system vendor or accounting software vendor, or you have just some custom software which already covers a lot of the workflow, you do not have to require your users to log into an external system, but you can use our APIs also to just open a specific web page which contains just the validation interface for a specific single document. And then when the user finishes processing the document, the controller returns back to you and to your system. We use the same style of APIs that, for example, credit card payment gateways are using. So very standard process. The third option, if the completely manual workflow isn't a good fit your process, but you do not want to write a completely custom software either, is using robotic integration, RPA, robotic process automation. If you are familiar with the RPA space, there is a couple of vendors. We work closely, in particular, with UiPath and Blue Prism, and you can just write activities in the RPA platform that use the standard user interfaces of your other systems, for example, your ERP system, your document management system, and so on. And those activities can then also automatically import data into Elis and export data to other systems. For UiPath, we already have some ready-made input and output activities that are very easy to use. You can very easily customize them to your use case, and you do not need to re-implement anything. Those activities are currently in private beta, but let us know if you would like to try them, if this is relevant for you, and we'll be happy to share them already. Yeah, those were the basic integration options. Now let's dive a bit into how to configure Elis. Basically, we will cover the basic setup of Elis to your needs, the basic customization step, and then we will cover how to customize Elis for your workflow further. Shall you be interested? Because as I mentioned, Elis is a very open platform, so we will cover some examples of entire Elis extensions that you can actually write and implement. But first, let's cover the configuration and how to customize Elis for your needs. If you already talked to our sales team, you likely already have a trial account or a demo account in Elis. If you don't, just talk to our sales team and they will be happy to set you up. We are also working on a self-service web sign up, so you do not have to talk to our sales team. That's coming within approximately next month. Basically, if you have this very basic configuration that we prepare for you, you have your own organization which has a default schema for the capture data. So it contains the default setup of the sidebar with the default list of fields that we recommend started with, but they might not be the perfect fit for your use case. Some might be missing. You may have some extra ones there, but no worries. You can customize all that. And you will start with a single queue and a single workspace with some default names, some default setup, but no worries. Again, you can easily create extra queues, extra workspaces if you have multiple use cases. And you will start with a single user, which is an admin user for this organization. But again, we'll cover how to set up more users and more user accounts so that your the human operators in your process can start using Elis right away. In general, on a high level, you can configure Elis in multiple ways. The basic, most level way, but also the most powerful way, is using our API interface. We have, as part of our API, are of course interfaces to import and export documents and do operations like that. But also, another part of the interface is setting up the users, the schemas, the queues and workspaces, and so on. So you can call all that using the API interface. But obviously, especially for less technical programmers and less technical users, using this isn't terribly user-friendly, and that's why we built a command line tool, Elis CTL, which we spell Elis Control, which is designed to make this easier and make especially the common operators very easy. So on the next slides, we will show you mainly how to use this Elis Control command line tool. In the future, we also have plans to enable all of the basic configuration step in the web interface. That's a work in progress on our side. Elis Control is actually a very fresh tool that we just released. So it's currently in beta. You can download it from our GitHub right now. It's available for both Windows, Mac, and Linux. So you can download them and you can set it up on all the major platforms. It has a couple of ways for using it. It's a tool which is designed to be used from a command line terminal. But if you just run, so you can run it with some explicit parameters to do just a particular operation. But the easiest way to use it, in particular on Windows, is just run the Elis control program itself, and it will open a command line window with an Elis shell where you can perform all the operations. Because obviously you can configure a lot of things in Elis, and you can do a lot of operations. In general, the philosophy behind the Elis control tool is that the commands are organized by a topic. The main topics are workspace, queue, schema, and user, and each of those topics has some specific subcommands. You will see that on the next slides. You might still, for some very advanced features, you might still need to refer to the APIs, but our goal is that, especially for the simple cases, you shouldn't have to, and you should be able to do everything in Elis. So if you start using Elis, the first command to start with is the command called configure. There you specify the API, the API interface. The API endpoint, the default one, should be fine for almost everyone, and the username and password is what you get from the from our sales team. Okay. The first thing to talk about is schemas. And Tomas already covered it very briefly. Basically, a schema is what we call the technical description of what's shown in the sidebar of the verification interface, and this corresponds to the data you are capturing within Elis. So typically, for example, for an accounts payable process, you are interested in some specific fields. You would like typically to capture the invoice number, the PO number, if it's on the invoice issue, the due date, a variety of amounts, supplier information, maybe also recipient information, and so on and so on. But obviously every workflow, every use case is very different, or at least just a little different. So that's why we let you completely customize the contents of the sidebar. That can be the order of the items, but also which items are there, which aren't. You can add extra items in the schema as needed, and you can also add a certain basic structure to the sidebar. So the sidebar is divided into sections, into specific sections, and also some fields, for example, the text details and the line items can have further structure of having richer records for each value, not just a single value. How to work with schemas is actually it can look a bit difficult at first, but in practice we see that it's actually pretty easy for our partners to customize everything. Basically, our schemas are in JSON files. So what you see on the right side of this slide are example JSON records for the first two fields on the schema, the invoice number and the order ID, and each of those records, what it covers is the label of the field in the user interface, the identifier which is used to identify that particular field in exported data, then the type of the record, which can be a data point, but it can be also a section or line item list and so on. And then another important thing is what we call the reader field names. Sometimes at some places in the documentation, you can actually see this three-letter acronym RIR. which is abbreviation for Rossum's invoice robot, and that's our internal code name for the data extraction API. So also in the documentation, you will see that we talk about the document management API and the data extraction API. The data extraction API is a legacy API that we offer, which directly interfaces with our AI core. The RIR field names refers to the identifier of the field as used in our AI core. So if you want to fill in some fields automatically based on our artificial intelligence engine, those fields, this is the list of fields that go there. You can see the complete list at the link at the bottom. And finally, each type has a specific each record has a specific type. So most commonly this can be a string, which is an arbitrary text value, but often we also have a specific type for numbers that are used especially for amounts, specifically for dates, and so on. You can find all those details in excruciating detail in our documentation, obviously, and I don't want to just recite the reference documentation here, but just to give you a high-level idea of how things are organized. So I will not be diving into further detail regarding the schema, but you can find everything in the documentation. And it's something that we'll repeat at the end, but it's worth noting that we actually just significantly overhauled our documentation. So if you visited our document management API documentation in the past, it's worth revisiting it since we just deployed a reworked version, which is much more detailed and much more precise. This is about the schema. So basically, if you want to customize the schema and customize the fields that we are capturing, what you would do is you would download the existing schema, typically the default one if you just got a fresh new account, and you edit this JSON file to taste. You just modify it so that it suits you. Obviously, you can iterate over it, so you can try different variations and update them in Elis, and until you reach a point where you are happy with how you have this configured. So how do you do this in practice? And this is the first example of using the Elis control tool. So in the Elis control tool, basically what we are seeing here now is the shell. So the Elis and the greater than sign is the prompt, which is shown by the Elis shell. And the first command we would be executing is the command QList, which basically says, okay, we are talking about the topic of queues, and we want to list all the queues. We are doing this command because as Tomas also mentioned briefly, a schema, the list of captured fields, is a property of a queue. So if we are working with schemas, we would be working with a schema in the context of a particular queue. We identify a queue to work with. Each object in Elis is identified by a unique numerical identifier, which is here in the ID column. The 8390 is the identifier of the queue we work with, and we can also see that in the queue list that it also shows the schema ID. We'll also talk about the other columns in this list when we will be talking about configuring queues. But for now, this is all that's important for us. The next command we will be executing is this schema get command, which is from the topic schema, and the particular command is get. And it has a certain parameter, which is dash and capital O, and then the schema.json. And this dash capital O and schema.json basically says instead of showing the schema on the screen, save it into a file. And it will just save this JSON file with the schema descriptor, and it just retrieves this from the schema with a particular ID associated with our default queue. So then in the green letters, in the green text, you see the contents of the schema.json which got saved. So this is the JSON file, very similar to what we saw on the previous slide, just with the extra section information and so on. So you can just open this file in your favorite text editor and customize everything as you need. Typically, what we actually typically do is we just cut and paste the most similar field if we want to create a new field, and we can also just remove the blocks for the fields that we do not want to have. So it looks a bit technical, but it's actually a very simple text format. So it should be something pretty easy to get hang of. And then when we are finished editing, and we customize the schema.json file to whatever we want, we can execute the last command on this slide, which is queue change and the schema content file, schema.json, and the ID of the queue. So what we are doing here is we are updating the configuration of the queue with the ID 8390, which is the default the queue that we have, and we are updating it such that we are changing the JSON descriptor of the schema. So what this does is it's essentially just updates the schema, updates the list of captured information, and the next time you open you open the verification interface and invoice in this queue, it will show the updated sidebar and the updated information. So you can obviously execute this command multiple times as you are experimenting with your schema. So you can just edit the file, execute this command, and so on and so on. So so we just covered the first important part of configuration, and that's modifying the sidebar, customizing the list of captured fields to your needs, to your particular process. Next, regarding the configuration, we'll cover the queue setup and the user setup as two other topics. This is about the queues, and the queues, as Tomas also mentioned earlier, queues are organized in workspaces. So one frequent question that we are often getting is how to organize this, how to decide what should be the structure of the queues and the workspaces. Elis is actually very flexible in this regard. And the rule of thumb is do what's most user-friendly to your human operator, because the most important aspect of a workspace is it's just a grouping of queues in the sidebar of the dashboards, which makes it easy for users to navigate between queues, so that they aren't all together, but they are organized a bit more. So the most common two ways we see for grouping queues to workspaces is the most common way is according to capture processes. So let's say you have very different capture processes within a single organization. For example, you have an accounts payable process, and then you have a process regarding statement processing or order processing and so on. And then you would just create separate workspaces for those processes, and the individual queues would be regarding, for example, a particular document type within the accounts payable process, whether it's an invoice or a receipt, for example. Or the other way to organize using workspaces and queues is to use workspaces to reflect the organization structure. So let's say you have multiple business units within your organization. It might make sense to just create a separate workspace for each business unit and the queues for a particular document. So this is really specific to a particular use case, and you have high flexibility regarding this. But those are the two common ways we recommend considering. So let's just quickly walk through the commands that what is going on here is when you first get an organization, it has a single default workspace called Invoices, and the first command just creates another one. So this is a very simple command. It's from the workspace topic. The specific command is create, and then the next parameter is just the name of the workspace to create. So when you execute this, and then execute workspace list, which lists all the workspaces there are. You will see that the output has two lines. One of the lines is for the original invoices workspace that already has also already a queue associated, because that's the default setup: single workspace, single queue in this workspace. And then we can also see that we have another newly created workspace called orders with another ID, which is in red here. So then we have, in this situation, we have two workspaces, and now let's do the setup so that each of those workspaces has two queues. So we have workspaces invoices and orders here corresponding to the different data capture processes you would be having, and then for within each of those workspaces, let's have a specific queue for EU-based documents and for US-based documents. This is actually something that we see quite often, that the capture data can differ by region, because different regions have different accounting standards, obviously, and then it can be practical to just use separate queues so that you can customize the capture data for each of those regions. We will be executing 3 queue create commands, because we already have the EU invoices queue from the default setup. So we will be creating a US invoices queue in the invoices workspace, and the EU orders and US orders queues in the orders workspace. And what I'm showing here is also a little bit of customization that you can do. Basically, when you are creating a queue, you need to specify the schema. So again, you would specify just the file name of a JSON file which contains the schema structure. So the typical way to do this is using the comments from the previous slide. Here you would download the schema of your default queue. You would modify it as needed, or you don't even need to modify it at the beginning, and just use this same schema and just pass that again back to this command as the basic schema to use. Obviously, you can use the queue change command later to modify to taste. Another aspect there is the locale parameter, and this is another reason why it might be worthwhile to have different queues for different regions, because the locale parameter for the locale attribute of a queue, it helps our AI core engine, because there are some cases where information is genuinely ambiguous. For example, date, or in case of dates, the dates are obviously written differently in the US and in Europe, for example, in Great Britain. So because the date and month order differ, so this locale hint helps the AI core engine to better interpret correctly the dates, but it also helps it correctly read the amount formats and so on. So this first command, queue create, name of the queue and so on, creates a queue. It shows the ID of the newly created queue on output. So this is the green text is again printed by Elis control tool, and it says that no email prefix was specified, and that's what we'll come to in the next example. In the next example, what we are doing is we aren't specifying the locale, but we are specifying two other parameters, and that's email prefix and bounce email. What this means is when creating the queue, we can also set up a so-called inbox for this queue. And the inbox represents the email gateway, something that we covered at the beginning of this part of the webinar. As one option for manual integration, but it's also actually an option that a lot of the API users are using, is that Elis can accept incoming documents through email. What happens there is Elis sets up a special unique email address for a particular queue, and all attachments that arrive in email to this email address are automatically imported to the queue. So the email prefix basically specifies the the email address, what Elis does is it appends a unique suffix to this prefix, so that different Elis users aren't colliding in their names. And then this email address shown here in green represents the email where you can send documents, and they will appear in the queue. One important aspect is what happens if Elis cannot process some documents. And then it's important that the documents don't just disappear, because obviously that will be problematic from an operational standpoint, because you aren't receiving, some documents are getting lost. Those could be refused because they are in unsupported format, or they are too long, or for similar different reasons. So the bounce email parameter just describes if Elis is unable to accept some document by email, who should be notified and to whom should be the attachment forwarded for manual processing. So that would be typically the operational administrator of the data capture process in an organization. Yeah, and the last example, it just again creates a specific queue, in this case for US orders, so it's in the orders workspace. It's again, then we specify the schema that we can freely customize, different schema for different queue, obviously, and then it specifies the locale, because in this case it's a US locale. Whereas if you do not specify a locale, Elis defaults to NGB, that means to the English Great Britain locale. Then in the end, we execute the queue list command just to see what we have done, the results of our work. So the newly added queues are highlighted here in yellow. As you can see, it also shows the inbox information, and it also shows which users have access to a queue, because if the users don't have administrative privileges, if their role is an admin, they do not have access to any queue by default, but you need to explicitly add them access to any queues you are creating. So only the default queue has access allowed by the default user, but no other queues so far have access enabled. And that's the last thing that we will cover regarding the configuration, and that's configuring the users. So when we are configuring users, I also thought that it would be useful to demonstrate in the Elis control shell interface how to navigate and how to get information about which commands are available. So we have the help command, but also after any specific topic or any specific command, you can use this special -- help parameter that you just write after the command, and it shows some basic usage information and list of further commands that are available. So if we just use run user -- help, it shows that we have commands create, list, change, and delete. And then we can go on and write user list, and it shows the list of users already created. Again, this is the default organization setup, so it has so far just a single user. But then when we want to create a user, again, we can just write user create -- help, and it shows detailed usage instructions describing how this command can be used and what are all the options that are available there. So now that we know the usage details, we can just go on and create some users. So if we run the user create command, what we write next is the list of queues that will be assigned to this user. So we will be creating two users, a user which we can call AP clerk -1, and a user which we can call PO clerk -1 for lack of better imagination. So the AP clerk would be assigned to the invoices data capture process, whereas the PO clerk would be assigned to the orders process. So you can see that each of those has access to different queues, and here at the end you can also see that the AP clerk has access to the blue queues, which are part of the invoices workspace, whereas the PO clerk has access to red queues, which are part of the orders workspace. So when we create those users, again in green is what Elis prints back, and it prints back the ID of the newly created user, and it prints back the auto-generated password. You can change this password anytime to a different one using the user change command. And also another important point I didn't cover yet is the username is formatted the same as an email. So we recommend just using the work emails of the particular individual users. Then obviously user list is a command, so we can see the results of the operation. One thing that we see here is the column groups, and it has admin written for the initial by default created user and annotator for those new users. So we have three different role types. One of them is admin, which can do all operations and has full access to the whole organization. Then the annotator, which can annotate data in queues assigned to this annotator. And the third group is a viewer, and that's just for accessing data. So a viewer would be commonly used, for example, for jobs who are downloading data from Elis and importing them to other systems in case they need. There are some security separation concerns. All right, so this covers the basics of configuration of Elis. You have learned how to customize the sidebar in the verification interface. You have learned how to create new workspaces and new queues for multiple document types to be processed in Elis or multiple separate capture workflows. And you learned how to configure, how to set up multiple user accounts so that you can actually easily give access to your users and set up user accounts as needed. Now let's talk more briefly about the customization options, because this was so far all mainly about just configuring Elis for your own needs. You can also read in the documentation about or instructions we are sharing with you, information about the basic integration. That means using the APIs or using the email gateway and then downloading exported data. And that can be a very simple software component which just does this single task. But the third very powerful mechanism there is for customization are the custom extensions. As I mentioned at the beginning of this section of the webinar, at Rossum we have a very open philosophy regarding extensibility of the Elis data capture platform, and we think that this is one of the key differentiators for Elis, and that's the fact that even though it's cloud-based, it's very easy to customize just by Elis users. Organizations using Elis, setting up their own microservices in their own control, running on their own hardware and with their own source code. So those microservices can be completely external to Elis, but that they can still very meaningfully extend Elis to a particular use case. For example, to maintain a continuous import and export of documents, because the basic integration options more cover especially regarding the export, more cover just some batch export every hour, every midnight, or something like that. Whereas you can also, in principle, use the extension mechanism to take the capture data and import it to a different system as soon in the immediate moment it is exported within the Elis verification interface by the data entry clerk. So if we are talking about, for example, a simple accounting workflow, as soon as the operator exports the document in Elis, you can write an extension so that it immediately appears in your accounting ledger. Another aspect is writing business rules for automation. So obviously the ultimate goal of artificial intelligence-based tools like Elis is to automate the data capture workflows as much as possible. And what you can actually do as part of the extension interface, you can implement your own custom business rules in the matter of you can simply check all the imported documents, you can inspect them in detail, and you can automatically select them for export rather than for manual review based on your business rules. For example, if the amount is smaller than something and the PO number has been matched in a database and some basic details are matching, you can implement this custom logic, and this is without any restrictions by Elis itself. It's just your own source code and your own databases, and you have full flexibility of implementing any business rules you need. And the third aspect is because we have a push interface available. We have a webhook. We have a webhook interface, which we call the connector interface in our documentation. We are sending notifications not just for each exported document, which is important for the continuous export mechanism, but also for each single user action during the verification process, and also at the moment the document enters Elis and becomes pre-captured by the AI core. So this is a very powerful mechanism, and those webhooks, what they can do is they can actually freely modify all the data captured so far, all the values. They can do things like if you have an enumeration type, which Alice also supports, having a select box in the sidebar with some multiple options, it can change the list of those options, and it can show messages back to the user during verification. So this is an extremely powerful mechanism for customization for a particular workflow. And this customization, what it then enables is it can help prevent lots and lots of errors during the capture process. It can immediately notify the user about potential problems, and on the fly it can do things like vendor matching and so on. So the simple possibilities for this is just things like verifying that, for example, if you have an identifier like invoice number or more particular PO number, you can immediately verify that the PO number is in the format which is officially used by your organization. You can verify that amounts you need to sum together are summing together. You can do things like look up into VAT registries to verify that the vendor is present in this registry, and that it's a legitimate invoice and things like that. And if any of those checks fail, you can show a message back to the user, and the message can be either a warning, which means it's just shown to the user and calls his attention, or it can be an error, and this error then actually prevents the document to be exported at all, and the user is forced to resolve the error before the document continues in a workflow. So if I just go back one slide, the interface is very powerful, but just from documentation can be challenging to get started. But we have some example extension implementations on our GitHub. Actually, those are linked at the bottom of this slide. So we have an example in Node.js, which just does a very simple check, and then we have another very short example in Python. It's just 120 lines of code, so it fits into 2 screens essentially, and it's again very simple extension which verifies that the PO number is in some particular format matching some particular regular expression, and shows an error shows a warning to the user if it's not so. It's an extension which automatically removes any non-numerical characters from captured invoice ID. Also, this type of operation is something you would often like to do some simple transformations on the captured data so that fit your data requirements. And this is also something that the extensions can do because they can modify the captured data. And third, this simple Python example actually implements vendor matching. And this is interesting because this vendor matching is actually here implemented completely on the microservice side. So again, it's something completely in your control, and you have the full power of writing completely custom business rules to do vendor matching or things like PO matching as you need. Just to show a simple screenshot of the vendor matching, what happens there is that the vendor name is prefilled by whatever was captured, and in case it's ambiguous, you can select the vendor from multiple possibilities, and all this matching the vendor name and transforming this within this select box, those multiple possibilities, and then mapping perhaps to your internal ID. That's all that you can do in your own code in this extension, and you can see the example code on our GitHub in the Python example connector. Another fun thing that you can do, and so far, honestly, this is not something that we have seen used in production yet, but we got a lot of feedback that this could be very useful for a lot of the data capture processes, especially in multilingual environments. Is you can do things using extensions like integrate Google Translate in the verification interface. Again, it's some very simple code where you can just select an arbitrary value on the page, and as soon as you do it, the captured text gets sent to Google Translate, and the translated result is then shown as a notification to the user as just a regular message. So your data entry clerks can very easily obtain translations of data just by dragging their mouse. So this is another thing that you can leverage the webhooks interface for and build in your extension. So that concludes the section of the webinar regarding the technical details. So we have covered the integration interfaces. We've covered how to configure Elis and how to customize Elis using the extension mechanism. And I think we are ready to wrap up, Tomas, right?
Yeah. So this is our first technical webinar. We always welcome your feedback. So if you we are very welcome to go to our GitHub and download the code examples and try everything. If you need some help, feel free to reach out to our support email. If you want to get some news about the API announcements, we have a Google group for that, so feel free to subscribe. If you want to start using Elis and you want to get a demo account, just write us an email to webinars@rossum.ai. These slides, we will share that with you into your inboxes. So we will send it probably tomorrow. And we have a lot of things that we are planning for the next couple of months. There will be another more RPA focused webinar that will describe simple integration of Elis and UiPath. We will do that together with one of our RPA partner, Innovation Path, and we are also releasing a new feature which is called Magic Grid. This will completely change the way how your users can extract data from tables. So if you just follow us on social networks or subscribe for our newsletters, and you will get informed once it is out. We will probably cover a couple of questions today, but if you don't want to ask questions now or you will have some questions later, feel free to send those questions to webinars@rossum.ai, and we will share the frequently asked questions later and we will send it to your emails. So we have a couple of questions, so I will ask Olivia if she can ask them, and we will try to reply.
Okay, so one of the first questions we just got was about document types and how we deal with unrecognized documents.
So actually, this webinar was mainly about processing invoices, but the AI engine of Elis is completely document agnostic. So it can be trained to understand custom documents. We have some use cases, real life use cases that are that give very good results. So actually, Alice can be trained on custom documents. You cannot do that in a self-service fashion right now. However, feel free to reach out to our either to Rossum at Rossum AI or to webinars Rossum AI, and we will connect with you, and we can discuss how the engine can be customized to fit to your needs. In the future, you will be able to train the engine completely yourself. However, today you need to get in touch with us, so we can train that for you.
Great. So the next question that just came up is about how you define or what type you define in the configuration schema, such as string, and what the impact is for recognition.
The type specified is mainly to ensure that in your follow-up integrations, when you export data from Elis, the data is in a well-defined format that you can then process automatically. So if you need to work with an amount as with a numerical type, it is enforced during the AI capture and during the manual capture that this really stays a numerical value and amount, and that you can really work it with it that way. So it's a constraint which the data value needs to follow at all times.
So the next question we got is about when the next webinar will be.
So it's a very good question. I hope you liked it. The next webinar, we already know the topic. It will be about integration of Elis and UiPath, and it will take place in the first half of March. We don't have an exact date, but we will share that with you. We will share that on our social networks. So just keep an eye on us, and we will let you know.
Great. So the next question, can Elis use natural language processing to return a service description summary of the invoice, such as legal services? Or would this need to be an example of where we should use extensions to connect to other NLP tools from third parties?
Definitely. So you can actually, yeah. So this would be a good case for something like this. What we do support in general.
For what? For custom extension.
Yeah, for custom extension, definitely. Good point. What we are capable of is automatically classifying documents to categories. We have some predefined categories, like distinguishing an invoice from basically a text invoice from a pro forma invoice, for example. So we are currently actually exploring using the same interface, the same categorization for finer classification, potentially even based on topic. But this would be an implementation option, just as customizing the document types and the fields captured. But so far, Elis is the best use case for Elis is to identify particular values to be captured rather than do high-level summaries of documents.
Yeah, but as mentioned, this can be done, and it was already done in a couple of custom extensions, like classifying particular line item details into specific accounts, for example. This is a very good use case for building a custom extension. We are also very open to work with other developers who would like to share their extensions, because currently extensions are like kept private. But if there is someone who would like to work with us and to build some generic kind of extension that can combine NLP with the power of our platform, we are always very happy to work with you. And feel free to reach us through the partners section of our website, and we can always discuss that.
So our long-term plan is to build an ecosystem around Elis with a library of standard extensions to use, a way to combine them, and so on. We are just on the beginning of this roadmap, but we do welcome initial partners in this regard.
Great. So the next question is about humans reviewing these documents and what happens when it's required for a human to review them.
So I will just go back to one of our slides. So when a human needs to require the documents, the way how it works, those data entry clerks usually they have a specific time frame within their workday when they log in to Elis, and basically they see all the documents that require their review. So it's super easy. They just open a web browser, log into Elis, and open a specific queue that they need to process, and they just go through the documents one by one. So this is how the queue looks like when they open it, and this is the backlog basically of what they need to go through. When they are processing the document, it looks like that. This is something that you can try in a demo, or you can see on our website. So it's super efficient to review the data, mainly because the Elis shows you the fields that needs to be verified, and it actually writes the extracted value just under the value on that invoice. So you don't need to move your eyes from the left to the right. You just quickly go through field one by one, and if you need to do correction, you just point and click with your mouse. You don't need to type anything. So this is how it works. Basically, they just sign up, they just log in, and they see that.
Okay, so the next question is about the difference between some kind of trial version that we offer and the full version. So let's say the business edition.
Okay, so the trial version comes pretty much with all the features. There are some custom add-ons that are not in the trial version, but it contains almost everything. The only thing that is turned off during the trial is the automated self-improving. But if you want to test this feature, feel free to reach out to us, and we do a lot of POCs and a lot of tests to show how the self-improving engine works. But if you just sign up for a trial, by default it's turned off, because usually you test it on just a couple of invoices to see the initial accuracy. But if you want to do some more detailed tests of improvements, we have a specific procedure how to do that. We can share the reports of accuracies before and after it training, so that you can see how quickly it can improve on your data.
Great. So the next question is about response time and how that can improve over time.
So if I understand correctly, the response time, I mean like the AI processing phase, probably, if I understand it correctly.
Perhaps.
So currently the time for processing is around 30 seconds per page. It's not super fast. The reason why it's not super fast is that the machine learning pipeline is actually super complex behind Elis. And our mission is to achieve, we believe in accuracy first, and the speed is not a big issue for our customers, because usually our customers are processing tens of thousands of invoices a month, and they have a large backlog anyway, so the processing time is not the first thing to solve.
Maybe to put this from another perspective, when considering speed, there are two important aspects. One aspect is the latency, and the other aspect is the throughput. So the latency is when you submit a particular document into Elis, how soon is it ready for data capture? While the throughput is how fast can Elis process a larger batch of documents. So Elis AI engine is actually highly parallel, so it can process a lot of documents at once. So if you submit a larger batch of documents, you do not need to wait to wait as long as it would take to process those documents sequentially. They are processed mostly in parallel. So even with large batches, they can be processed very fast. Even though for a single particular document, it might currently take a short while to be ready for verification.
Great. So this will be the last question, and it's asking if it's possible to create a custom extension to send reviewers a daily reminder that they have X number of invoices awaiting review.
It's a very good question, and actually, this is a very nice example of custom connector. So this is easily doable. I believe this can be done in just like a couple of hundred lines of code. Actually, the way how we work, if we see some pattern that multiple customers require the same feature, we are able, and that's what we do. We move it from custom extensions to the platform itself. Currently, this is not supported, but this might be a very nice example of a generic connector, generic extension that can be used basically by anyone.
Definitely, and you can either build a custom extension, or you can build just a much simpler service which just uses a single API endpoint. So it's something that's really simple to implement in a customized way.
So our time is up. So if you have any, we will take all the questions that you asked, and we won't ignore them. We will write all the questions and answers and share that by email. If you have any other additional question that comes to your mind, even tomorrow, feel free just to send it to webinars@Rossum AI, and we will add it to the list of questions that we will answer.
Great, thank you guys. So just keep an eye out for some emails from us in your inbox, and we're looking forward to your questions.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for your time, and hope to see you again soon.
Goodbye.
Thank you.